Hello again, everyone. This is Professor Casey. Today we're discussing subjects, predicates, and objects. This is kind of a follow-up to lesson 1 that we had right over the parts of speech. This is kind of the next level here, okay? So we've gone from discussing how words are categorized to how sentences really all fit together, okay? And this particular lesson is one that can get a little bit confusing, right? But as long as you have a basic understanding of the parts of speech, how words are categorized, how they fit together, and how they relate to one another, hopefully this should end up being a little bit smooth, okay? So we'll take on each one of these 3 different topics individually, and hopefully we can make a little bit of sense of it. So the first thing that we discuss here is subjects. Okay, and subjects in a sentence are any noun, okay, in this case it's usually just a single noun, right? Remember we said a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea, and the subject is whatever noun in a sentence is doing an action, okay? And this really depends on how many nouns you have in a sentence, right? You might only have 1, which makes it really easy, or you might have 2 or 3 or 50 nouns, okay, right? You might have a lot going on. Okay, so basically the subject, again, is the noun in the sentence that is doing an action. And there's 2 different types of subjects that we'll talk about here, okay? First one is called a complete subject, okay? A complete subject is the noun plus any kind of modifiers that might exist next to it, okay? And what I mean by modifiers is adjectives, okay? And we talked about adjectives in the previous lesson as well, okay? An adjective is any kind of description word that goes along with a noun, okay? So a complete subject is typically a noun plus an adjective, if there is one. Sometimes there is, sometimes there's not. So for example, in the sentence that I've got going on here, the chocolate cake tasted very good, okay? In this particular instance, the complete subject is going to be the chocolate cake, okay? Because chocolate is the adjective here, right? It tells us what kind of cake we're in for, okay? And the cake is the noun itself. Okay. Now, like I said before, when it comes to articles like the, right, I'm not really worried too much about seeing, that being a part of all this, but technically, yes, it does comprise a part of the complete subject. Okay. So again, complete subject is a noun plus an adjective if there is one. Now, a simple subject is just what it sounds like. It's a much more simplified version of this, okay? And basically what this is just the noun by itself, okay? Whatever the noun performing the action actually is. So if we look back again at the same example, the chocolate cake tasted very good, all we have to do really is look back again at the complete subject, what you see up here, the chocolate cake. Okay. Now, if you look at that particular example, we already have the simple subject isolated in the complete subject. We just get rid of all of the adjectives and the article, in which case we're just left with cake. Okay. So the complete subject then, just to review, is the chocolate cake, and the simple subject is just cake. Now, a couple more examples here, just to kind of give you a few more. We have the tomato plant is already 4 feet tall. Okay, here we actually have a couple of nouns working together. Okay, we have plant, we have feet. Okay, in this case, though, the simple subject is going to be just plant, right? Because we're already discussing just the noun that's doing the action. And in this case, the action is what we talked about before in the previous lesson, is a passive verb, is. Okay, it exists. Okay. In which case, if we add any kind of description words along with it, the adjective is tomato, okay, because it tells us what kind of a plant it is. Okay? So tomato plant then will be the complete subject, and the simple subject would just be plant. Here's another one. A strong rainstorm blew through recently. Okay? Simple subject here is the storm, because the storm is what is blowing through. Okay? And if we add any kind of adjectives along with it, it gets a little bit longer, okay? Now we have a strong rainstorm, okay? Tells us specifically what kind of a storm this is. Just a few more. The school bus went quickly over the road, okay? Here we're talking about a complete subject being the school bus, right? It tells us what kind of a bus it is, okay? And we know that the school bus is the thing doing the action, right? It's the thing going quickly over the road. And the simple subject then is just bus, right? We get rid of school, which tells us what kind of bus it is. The blue and white hat belonged to my aunt. Okay, we have a much longer one here. The complete subject then is the blue and white hat, right? It describes the hat. Okay, the colors blue and white give us a sense of what the complete subject is. And then stripping them away, we're left with the simple subject, which is just hat. A snapping turtle can bite off your finger. Okay. Here we go. We have another noun that's performing an action. In this case, a snapping turtle. Okay, tells us what kind of turtle. And if we get rid of snapping, we're left with just turtle, right? This is our simple subject. And this one is one that tends to confuse people a little bit just because it's so complicated, right? It has a lot of description words going on. This one says, the gentle giant in the yellow hat climbed down the large tree. Okay. Now, what we're looking for here, again, remember, is whatever noun in the sentence is doing an action. Okay, and in this particular example, it's buried under a lot of description words. Okay, so the gentle giant in the yellow hat is going to be our complete subject. Okay, we know that this something in there is doing the action. Now, the typical temptation that most people have when it comes to this particular example is people tend to look at whatever the last word is, right? Up until now, that's been our precedent, right? But in this case, the hat is not the thing climbing down the large tree. The giant is, okay? So the gentle giant in the yellow hat is our complete subject, but if we strip away what it's wearing and all that kind of stuff and whatever, personality traits it has, we're left with just the giant. Okay? So again, not to confuse anybody further, but sometimes when it comes to finding just a simple subject in a sentence, it's kind of difficult in some cases because, again, it's buried under a lot of extra stuff. So again, just to briefly review the two types of subjects that we have. The complete subject, which is the noun plus any adjectives, and then the simple subject, which is the noun by itself. Okay, and remember, the subject in this case is whatever noun in the sentence is performing an action. Okay, sometimes it's one thing, sometimes, as we'll see in a future lesson, it'll be more than one thing, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Now we can talk a little bit about predicates. Okay, and just like we had when it came to the building blocks of English, right? We had nouns and verbs. Okay, we have the same type of parallel going on here. Okay. If the noun in the sentence performing an action is the subject, then the action being performed is the predicate. Okay? So a subject and a predicate are the same thing as a noun and a verb. Okay? And just like we had with subjects, the same thing applies to predicates. We have a complete and a simple predicate. Okay? And it's the same type of principle here. Okay? A complete predicate is the verb plus whatever adverb might exist. Okay, again, just like with subjects, sometimes there is an adverb and sometimes not. Okay, and then the simple predicate is just the verb by itself. Okay? So similar type of situation here. If we go back to a chocolate cake example, okay, change it up a little bit here. We already know in this sentence the chocolate cake tasted delicious. We changed it just a little bit. We already know the chocolate cake acts as the subject of the sentence. Okay? So you can almost draw a line right down the middle of the sentence between the words cake and tasted. Okay? We already know the chocolate cake is our complete subject, and so we can move it out of the way. And so what we're left with then for our simple predicate is the word tasted. Okay? This is our verb. And then if we add the adverb on the end of it to tell us how the cake tasted, we have tasted delicious. Okay? So again, very similar to what we had before. It's almost a mirror image of what we saw with the subject. We have tasted for our simple predicate and tasted delicious for the complete predicate. Now just some examples of predicates here, just to hammer home the point. The sleeping bear snored loudly. Okay. Now, looking at this particular sentence, if we diagram it a little bit, just in our minds, if you want to do it on a piece of paper, you can. If we look at the example just like we had before with the chocolate cake, okay, whatever subject we have in this sentence, let's look at that first. Okay, our complete subject for this sentence is going to be the sleeping bear. Okay, we know that is the noun in the sentence that's performing an action. Okay, and just like we had with the chocolate cake, you can almost divide the sentence right down the middle. If we know that the sleeping bear is our subject, we move it out of the way. And for our complete predicate, we're left with the rest of the sentence, snored loudly. Okay, snored is our verb, and loudly, just like we talked about in our first lesson, ends in ly, so it's very easy to recognize it as an adverb. And if we remove the adverb now, we're left with the simple predicate, snored. So sometimes sentences like this are very easy to diagram. Okay? Sometimes you can tell very easily what the complete and simple subject is and the complete and simple predicate. Bobby held his newborn daughter gently. This one's a little bit different because if we look at the subject here, the subject is the noun performing the action. And in this case, it's Bobby. Okay? And if you notice, Bobby doesn't have any kind of description words attached to him. He's just Bobby. Okay? So Bobby acts both as our complete and our simple subject. Okay? In this case, we can just call it the subject. Okay? So just like we had before, we move the subject out of the way. Now we have a big, long version of the complete predicate. Held his newborn daughter gently. It's the complete description of the action taking place. Now, to shave all of the adverbs out of the way, okay, what are we left with then when we have a simple predicate? What's the one word for what Bobby did? Held. Okay, Bobby held. Similarly, we have another one here. Tara ordered pizza for dinner instead of cooking. Okay, just like we have up here with Bobby. Okay, Tara is our subject. Right? She has no other description words attached to her. So we can move her out of the way because we know she's our subject. Now, for the complete predicate, again, just like with Bobby, it's the rest of the sentence. Ordered pizza for dinner instead of cooking. And of course, what is the one word for what Tara did? She ordered. Okay. So again, we have this dynamic here where we have a noun performing an action and the action itself being performed. A few more examples of predicates, again, just to kind of hammer home the point. Sasha is scheduling a dentist appointment. Now, this example is a little bit different from what we've seen before, okay? And I'll explain very quickly here. If we look at the subject first in this sentence, right, just like we had with Bobby and Tara, it's Sasha. Okay, Sasha is the one doing the action in the sentence. And of course, that leaves us with the rest of the sentence for the complete predicate, is scheduling a dentist appointment. Now, the tricky part with this sentence comes with the word is. Okay? This is what is called a helping verb. Okay? A helping verb is some kind of a verb that gives us a sense of time. Okay? Now, when it comes to is scheduling, that means that Sasha is doing this right now as we speak. Okay? If we want to put it in the past, we say she was scheduling. And if we put it in the future, we want to say she will be scheduling. Okay? So the helping verb is part of the complete predicate here. Okay? When it comes to the simple predicate, though, we're just left with the verb scheduling. Okay? So the helping verb actually is not part of the simple predicate. Okay? It's technically a descriptive word because it tells us when this is taking place. Okay? A little bit misleading there, so you have to kind of hopscotch over the helping verb in order to get to the simple predicate. Malim will drive everyone. Okay? Very similar type of situation. We know Malim is the one who is our subject. She's the one doing the action. Will drive everyone, just like before, is the complete predicate. But here we have will drive. Okay? Will drive tells us that this is going to happen in the future. Again, will is a helping verb. If we remove the helping verb, we're left with the simple predicate, drive. Okay? This one's a little bit simpler. Jake adopted a new puppy. Jake is our subject because he's the one doing the action. Adopted a new puppy is the complete predicate because it is the rest of the sentence. It describes the full action, what Jake did. And then the single word for what he did is adopted. Last example for predicates. The singer finished her last song. Again, we know the singer is our complete subject, right? It's our subject in general, right? She's the one doing the action. So the rest of the sentence, finished her last song, is the complete predicate. And the simple predicate is just the word finished. So that's predicates. Again, subjects and predicates follow the exact same rules as one another. Okay? If we're looking for a complete form of one or the other, then we're looking for, in this case, when it comes to subjects, the noun plus an adjective. And if we're looking for the complete predicate, we're looking for a verb and an adverb. Now, the final element we'll talk about today is objects. And objects are a little bit different from subjects and predicates. Objects don't always take place in sentences. Okay? It depends on how complicated the sentence gets. All sentences have a noun and a verb, so a subject and a predicate. But the more complicated a sentence gets, the more nouns are introduced, the more types of objects we have. And an object is typically a noun in a sentence that is being affected by whatever the subject is doing. Okay, so again, this gets a little bit more complicated, but bear with me. We have two different types of objects. We have direct objects and indirect objects. A direct object is usually a second noun that is added in a sentence. It's whatever noun is being affected by whatever the subject is doing. Okay? So we'll give you an example here. If we go back to the chocolate cake, okay, we'll modify it a little bit more, add a little bit to it. The chocolate cake tasted delicious to Ashley. Okay? Just to kind of give you a familiar example, we already know the chocolate cake is our subject. Okay? It's the thing doing the action. It exists and it tastes delicious. Okay? We already know that tasted delicious is our predicate, right? It's the action. It's whatever the subject is doing. Okay? In this case, the cake just exists and it tastes good. So now we're left with a new element, right? An added noun. Okay? In this case, the added noun is Ashley. Ashley is our direct object because she is being directly affected by whatever the subject is doing. Okay? The chocolate cake is affecting her because it tastes delicious to her. Now, indirect objects, now that you kind of have a little bit of an understanding of what a direct object is, indirect objects are anytime you add a third noun to a sentence. Okay? And the description I have here might be a little bit confusing, but I say that this is something that is caught in between the direct object and the subject. Okay? And once you see it in the context of a sentence, it makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so what I have here is a new example. This says, John read his tiny nephew an exciting story. Okay? Now, if we go back to the very beginning, if we look for the subject in the sentence and use this particular pathway I'm about to show you, this becomes a little bit easier. Okay? Our subject in the sentence is John. Okay? John is the one doing the action in the sentence. Okay? Now, if we look for the predicate, the one word for what John did, it's read. John read, subject and predicate. Now, the next thing that we look for after we look for the subject and the predicate is we look for a direct object. Okay? Direct object, remember, is whatever is being affected by whatever the subject is doing. So now we can take the subject and the predicate and make a question out of it. John read. What did John read? John read a story. Okay? Or an exciting story. You can use either one. So now we're led from the subject to the predicate to the direct object. John read a story. Now we're still left with a third noun here. Okay? Who or what is being affected by the story? The nephew. Okay? And this is what I mean by being caught in between, because John and read is at the beginning of the sentence. The direct object is at the end of the sentence, and nephew, the indirect object, is caught in between these two groups. It's in the middle of the sentence. Okay? So this is kind of a strange pattern that you can tell here, but it works kind of in a stepping stone way. Look for the subject, look for the predicate, look for the direct object, and look for the indirect object. Okay? And it depends on what you have to work with. Okay? But we'll go through a few more examples here, and again, hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. The doctor sent me a bill. Okay, a little bit more of a simple sentence here. Who or what is our subject? The doctor, right? The doctor is the one doing the action. What's the one word for what the doctor did? Sent. Okay. Now we can take those two things, doctor and sent, and find the direct object. Turn it into a question. What did the doctor send? He sent a bill. Okay. So now we're still left with one more noun in the sentence. In this case, it's a pronoun. Okay. Who or what does the bill affect? Me. Okay. I'm the one paying it. Okay. So doctor and sent is your noun and your subject and predicate. The direct object is the bill. It's whatever the doctor is sending. And then the indirect object is me, because the bill affects me. We gave my mother a book. Okay. Who is our subject here? Who is doing the action? We. Okay, in this case, it's a pronoun. What's the one word for what we did? We gave. Okay, now we have a subject and a predicate. What did we give? We gave a book. Right? Now, going back to the middle of the sentence, we're looking for who or what the book affects. Mother. Just a few more examples here. We're almost done. This one comes in the form of a question, so it's a little bit more complicated, right? Has your boss sent you an email? Now, we're still looking for the same thing when it comes to the subject of a sentence. Who or what is performing an action? If we're looking for that, then in this case, the boss is the one that sent an email. Okay? So if boss is our subject, the boss is the one doing the action, then we just look for the next thing, the predicate. What did the boss do? Boss sent. Okay? Now we go through the rest of our process. What did the boss send? An email. Email is the direct object. And who or what does the email affect? You. Our father built the family a redwood picnic table. Father is our subject because father is the one doing the action. Built is the predicate because that's the one word for what father did. The redwood picnic table, or just table if you want, is the direct object because this is what father built. And then who or what does the table affect? The family. Jim built his granddaughter a sandcastle. Same thing here. Jim is our subject because he's the one doing the action. Just like father did before, Jim built. What did he build? He built a sandcastle. And who or what does the sandcastle affect? The granddaughter. We told mom a lie. Direct object here is lie because this is what we told. Okay, we is our subject. Told is our predicate. We told a lie. That's our direct object. And we told it to mom. Last one. Mrs. Peterson assigned the class 10 math problems. Mrs. Peterson is our subject. She's the one doing the action. Assigned is the word for what she did. It's our verb, our predicate. She assigned the 10 math problems, or just problems. And then who or what do they affect? The class. So hopefully now you have a general understanding of subjects, predicates, and objects. Okay? And this is how we can diagram a sentence to figure out what is doing the action and what is supposed to gain the most importance in a sentence, what we're supposed to be paying attention to. So hopefully that'll help you out for our second lesson here, and I will see you next time.